Hi everyone, and welcome to week 4. This week we're going to be getting into dialectics and digging a little more into the specific dialectic of face saving, and that's where most of our readings focus. I first wanted to quickly recap what I was seeing in week 3 and offer a few other tips and tidbits related to self-reflexivity and just general training. So as you all probably saw, well, first of all, I was really impressed by the range of systems that you analyzed and critiqued in our discussion. You took a very critical perspective to some different systems like education, religion, law, criminal justice, and health. And so I thought each of you brought a different perspective there and really dug into unique aspects of those systems. One thing that I tried to clarify halfway through the week was when I was talking about privilege, I wasn't necessarily looking for privileges for all people in a system. What I was looking for was power structures within a system. And who those power structures benefit. Generally, the people that benefit from systems are either those who have some control or some power in the system. So for healthcare, we could say doctors or nurses or hospital administrators have power there and therefore are privileged in that system. But also a lot of these systems fall in the status quo. So whoever fits with the status quo is privileged by that system, and whoever doesn't fit is not privileged in that system. I'm thinking of a couple examples. Of course, they're escaping my mind. One example would be one of you talked about religion as a system, and we could look at certain religions and see that they were against homosexuality. And so in a system, a religious system that is anti-homosexuality, heterosexuality is the norm. Thus, heterosexuals benefit from that system and homosexuals are marginalized by that system. So that's one example, and that's what I was looking for in the privilege thing, was really what power structures are at play, what's the undercurrent of this system, and who's benefiting from it that way. So hopefully we can kind of move that conversation a little bit in what's left of week 3. But by the time you see this, it'll probably be week 4. So we'll see. We'll see where we go. Also, I wanted to mention and applaud you for your exercises. I was really impressed by the different metaphors that you came up with. Some I had never heard before, so it was really interesting to hear a new metaphor and see you dissect it and pull some different interpretations that I frankly wouldn't have come to myself in 1,000 years. A lot of you remarked on how you chose the same metaphors and had similar interpretations, and kind of asked the question, what would it have turned out like if I'd given each of you or asked each of you to focus on one metaphor? Would you have come up with the same interpretations, or would they have been varied? And that's a very interesting study. I don't know, I think that might tell us something about how culturally similar we are in some aspects, or it might point out some diversity that we have in our class. So I was glad to see you thinking about how you could spin this exercise just a little differently and analyze different parts of it. And on that same thought, I mean, this exercise that we did in week 3 is something I would do in a training or do in a classroom. And you can absolutely do it online, as we saw. I want to thank the people who stepped up to be reporters and facilitators. I saw some fantastic facilitation going on in the small groups. And then I just saw everybody just very active in those groups. So whether you had a defined role or not, you were all stepping in to help manage that conversation. So I was really happy to see that happen. A couple of things, if you were to do this exercise in a class, it does make sense to break into small groups depending on your size. So if I had a class of, let's see, we're about 13 students in this class, I could run this exercise where I have each of you share your metaphor, and then the class kind of debriefs it and discusses it and interprets it. But that's getting pretty big. That's going to take a lot of time out of the class to do that thinking, and we're going through the whole process 13 times with 13 different metaphors. So what I would probably do, and what I would suggest you do in situations like this or trainings like this, is when you start to get quite a few people, one thing you can do to cut down the time is turn the exercise into a think, pair, share. And what you do when you do a think, pair, share is you give people like 5 minutes, and maybe that would be high. You need to just kind of watch how long people are taking to do the first part of the exercise. So you give them time to think of a metaphor if you haven't pre-assigned it. And then you ask them to start dissecting it or start interpreting that metaphor and looking for cultural implications in it. So give them some time to do that. Keep your eye on who's finishing up early. And when you see a lot of people start to finish up and start to talk with their neighbors, then I would move on to the next piece. And the next piece is you pair them all up with somebody right next to them, and you ask them to share their metaphor with that person and kind of offer their interpretations and have a mini discussion. And for that, I would again give about 5 to 10 minutes to let people share their metaphors and have a discussion. Again, listening in to make sure that you move them on before they start talking about other things that aren't focused on the assignment. And then the last thing you do is have select people share back their metaphors and have a class discussion around just a few samples. And this is usually fine. People have gotten a chance to think on their own. They've gotten a chance to share what they were thinking of with a partner. And you've kind of debriefed the class as a whole and kind of come to some consensus about what you're learning from the cultural metaphors. The other thing that you can do that we did online is break them into small groups. And a couple of things when you're working with small groups, there's a couple generalizations or rules that I would suggest you consider when you're facilitating with small groups. One is called the rule of 4, and the idea behind this is that anytime you get more than 4 people in a group, someone's not going to be participating. We've all been in different groups and we all have different styles, whether you're the person who's always the one talking and leading the group, or you're the person who is happier to just sit back and listen and aren't really comfortable participating. The thing with 4 people in a group is there's really not an opportunity for one person to be quiet. You notice everybody with a group of 4. You get 5 or more and you can start losing people who can just sit there and there's just not time or space for them to jump in with their ideas. I tend to be a person, I'll jump in and say things right away, but I need time to process, so I'll sit there pretty quietly for a while and think about and listen to what everybody else is saying, and then jump in. So with a larger group that gets going, I might not have a chance to jump in and say anything. So that's a rule of 4. Not that you can never have small groups over 4, but just be cognizant of what that will do to the group. The other thing that we did in our exercise this week, and I would suggest you do, whether you're doing this online or you're doing it in the classroom or a training site, is self-reporting roles. And what self-reporting roles are is asking people in the group to take on a responsibility for the group. Usually the self-reporting roles that I give, I only gave 2 for this week, but I'll always ask for a timekeeper, someone to keep their eye on the clock so they can complete the assignment, write something on a flip chart, whatever they need to do within the amount of time. I ask somebody to facilitate the conversation to make sure everybody has a chance to participate, and that can also help if you have